purchased
How did this,
other user.
did you get a new computer or something?
Yeah. I don't remember what my, it's okay.
I don't know.
You don't have to.
I assume you've tried
I
first.
think
letter
I
first
might
name.
need to be connected.
Or do I read this closed session thing now, or when we come back?
Well, when we
Come back for this.
come back, you will read that to say we're back, you know, we're out of
And
closed
Miss
session. And we all have to
Robinson
vote.
had a computer, her computer died.
Got it fixed yet?
Oh, gosh.
Just breathe.
Everything happens, you know, like last minute.
We're doing the best we can.
Yes.
That's right.
We are
Everybody
simply
chill.
doing the best we can on this longest day of the year.
You know, you're right.
No wonder I'm so tired. It's a
I'm
whole
blaming
minute
it on the
longer than
Novocaine.
yesterday.
Novocaine always makes me tired.
Excuse me, sorry.
Right. No. No. Join, cancel.
Do we have everybody we need?
Yes. Oh, yes.
Is Brenda available?
Yes, I am.
Aha. Okay. Well, why don't we call the meeting back to order? We have been in closed session.
Yes, I move that the city council members certify by recorded vote that to the best of each member's knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from the open meeting requirements of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act and identified in the motion convening the closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered in the closed meeting.
Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Ms. Robinson, would you take the roll, please?
Counselor McGill,
Yes.
Counselor Payne,
Yes.
Counselor Pinkston,
Yes.
Mayor Snook,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Wade.
Yes.
Okay, so that motion passes. We are now back in open session. The first item of the agenda should be the approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve or amend the agenda? I think the agenda as originally produced has to be amended in one respect, in that we're deleting what had been item number 10, reconstituting the Charlottesville Planning Commission and appointing and reappointing its members for staggered terms. That's something we'll have to do, but we're just not going to do it tonight.
Right.
So I would move that we approve the agenda with the amendment that item 10 be deleted from our agenda tonight.
Is there a second?
Second?
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. So, as I said before, the meeting will be divided into a number of different sections. The 4 o'clock session right now is to hear and discuss presentations that do not require a council vote. We will go back into a closed meeting between about 5:30 and about 6:30. Then the council business meeting, which will begin around 6:30. Reminder that there is seating available in council chambers for up to 23 pre-registered attendees and media. Other than that, you can tune in by Zoom. So the reports for the 4 o'clock agenda, the first one is on city-owned properties, and Ms. Kelly, Brenda Kelly, to present to us.
Good afternoon. I need to share my screen, so I am going to do that. And can you all see that?
Yes?
Yes.
Okay, so for the record, I am Brenda Kelly, Redevelopment Manager with the Office of Community Solutions. And today we are going to talk about city properties. As you may recall, a couple meetings ago, we had a discussion on city leases. And some of this discussion will be a duplicate of that, but this will also be more information specifically on city-owned properties. So when we're talking about city-owned properties, we're talking about city-owned properties within city limits and those city-owned properties located in the county. And also we're talking about jointly owned properties, which are typically properties owned jointly by the city and the county. So those properties in the city limits and those properties located in the county. This discussion will not include a discussion on streets, alleys, paper streets and paper alleys, which are basically unimproved streets and alleys, and those properties owned by the City of Charlottesville School Board. So we will not be talking about those properties. So here's some facts about our discussion today. So the total number of parcels that the city owns in the county and the city is 170. Total number of jointly owned properties, 18. The approximate acreage of city-owned properties within the city, 789 acres, and over 2,800 acres of city-owned properties located in the county. So as we break this down a little bit more, here's the number of parcels specifically broken down by city-owned properties and jointly owned properties. And then we can talk a little bit more about these city-owned properties and how we have tried to classify them, just so we have some idea of what we're looking at. So this identifies how we've had classified the properties and roughly the number of parcels. So as you go through this, we've tried to generalize the description. And for example, the ones at the bottom, the vacant lots, right-of-ways, and utilities, those are typically city-owned properties that don't fall under those other classifications. And for example, in this category of those 32 properties, 2 of those parcels are over half an acre. 6 of those parcels are between a quarter of a half an acre. And all the rest of those 32 then are less than a quarter of an acre. So that we thought that information might be kind of useful to all of you. So let's give you some examples of some city-owned properties. I'm sure you're all aware of the fire stations, the schools, the city facilities, the parks, properties like that. So we thought we'd give you some examples of ones that you may not be as aware of. So this is an example of a surface parking lot the city owns on West Main Street. And also adjacent to this property is the Star Hill Park. So the picture on the left is the view of the city-owned parking lot from West Main Street, and the view on the right is where that L-shaped piece of property wraps around the back of those properties fronting West Main. And in the picture on the right, you can also see off to the right the Star Hill Park, which is adjacent to that. Here's another parking lot. This is one of the only instances in the city where there is a permit-only parking lot in a residential neighborhood. And this parking lot is located on Esty Street. And in case you don't know where Esty Street is, this is south of West Main and the railroad tracks. UVA has a daycare center right across the street. Another property, and this would fall under that category or description of other parks and trails type properties. This is a property the city owns over by Free Bridge that is actually an entrance to a trail. So just to give you some idea of these smaller parcels that are located throughout the city, this is a good example of that. In 2019, the city approved a purchase of property by the Parks and Rec Department. I don't think any of you were on the city council at that time, but it was most of this property adjacent to Jordan Park. And the previous property owners had already platted these 6 lots. So this is another city-owned property that, you know, at some point, we probably need to look at a possible development of affordable housing. That's one of the discussions we had early on when the city first approved the approval of the purchase of this property. And the picture on the right is what you see of that property. This is at the corner of Roy's Place and Hartman's Mill Road. So just give you an idea where that is in the very south end of the city. So city-owned properties located in the county, this is how we basically developed a description of those properties and the number of parcels associated with those descriptions. And here's an example of some of these properties. So Avon Street Extended, many of you may be familiar with the Public Works Yard and the CAT location and the school bus storage areas. All these parcels in yellow are located in the county and they are owned by the city. And here's over 1,000 acres that the city owns on the very, very western end of Albemarle County. This is the Sugar Hollow Reservoir. And also, I'm not sure how many people know this, the city owns about 10 acres at the Lake Albemarle. And this is again in the western part of Albemarle County. So jointly owned properties within city limits, we did have a discussion during the lease discussions about a lot of these properties. And jointly owned properties located in Albemarle County, and these are typically the open space related properties throughout the county. So while we are doing a lot of this research, and we've known for some time, we do have some challenges when we talk about city-owned properties. We need to develop a better consistent process when we have requests to dispose of the properties or acquire the properties. Maintaining these properties. Are there departments currently maintaining these properties? We think a lot of them aren't being maintained. And are any of these properties developable? So we've looked at this a little bit more specifically and have some recommendations. First of all, we need to develop a standard process when we get requests for acquisition or disposition of properties. Some examples, how do we go about valuing the property? Do we treat not-for-profits differently than for-profits? Different and various, and all the departments maybe need to have some input on what's currently on those properties. Is it needed for utilities or future right-of-way purposes? Maybe there's a history on the property that there's some restrictions about future uses of those properties. So we need to develop some type of standard process that addresses all these concerns. When we're talking about maintaining properties, we need to identify a departmental staff point of contact. What department should be responsible for maintaining these properties? And in the case of some of our leased properties, is it appropriate to have the lessee actually maintain the property and have that put in the leases specifically? And are any of these properties developable? The city staff will be looking at most of these properties in a department-wide process and looking at if any of them are viable for development. And most likely we will be back in front of you to discuss this in more detail. So at this time, our recommendation is to implement these recommendations and move forward with those recommendations and be back with you in the future. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
I have a couple of questions about some of the specific properties. I, for one, had not realized that we own 10 acres out by Albemarle Lake. I did a little research and found at least some information about the accident of history that led to that, going back to 1938 with Albemarle Lake being the product of the Civilian Conservation Corps and so on. But I did not, I guess the answer is that Charlottesville wound up buying some of that land as part of its effort to secure a water supply. Is that right?
That is what we have found with especially a lot of those county properties, is that's exactly what a lot of those properties are, having to do with a water supply. I'm sure Public Utilities Department has a lot more information on the specific history, but that is primarily my understanding of a lot of those county properties.
Has there ever been any effort for Charlottesville to use that 10 acres out there?
So a couple years ago, I had a conversation with the Parks and Rec director, and there was some discussion about there may be a use in the future to use that as a summer camp or something like that. But I think that's what we'll get into more discussion with all the departments about. Is there an intended use, or what is the current use? Are there any restrictions, those type of concerns with each of the specific properties?
Yeah, okay. I mean, the other ones that had jumped immediately out were when you showed the graphic with those 6 lots around Charlie Close. I was thinking, you know, it looks like they're ready to go. What's the story? You say the city actually bought them in 2019?
Yes, that is when we closed. The city purchased them. Most of the properties that we probably will be looking at, if they are developable or not, that we've had some kind of preliminary looks at, they do all have challenges with development.
Sure.
Those particular properties have some topographical challenges, so we're already aware of that, but that is something we will be looking at.
Yeah. Okay.
The 67 acres on Avon Street, that's the transit, right?
That is, yes, the CAT's there, the school bus storage, Public Works, and quite a bit of vacant land. And part of that is divided by a stream. I think it's a portion maybe of Moore's Creek. That might be not correct, but
And it looks like we own a corridor down the stream to another section kind of over there by Quarry Park.
yes, over off Monticello. So those are all kind of interconnected. And also you'll see along Avon Extended at the south end, there's a vacant lot there also.
Uh-huh. Oh, right there, 77E 2-1.
Yes.
Okay. I mean, my questions are, in working through all of this, what are we finding out about our leases? I mean, I know it just kind of brings more questions too. That are we applying leases the same to everybody? And what consistency do we have? What is our policy around this? And I think that's something, council, we're gonna have to be working on, is overall, with the city manager's office, what is going to be our land use ownership policy?
And so there would be a component having to do with leased or rented spaces, which we heard, we got a report on it two meetings ago, I think? Does that sound right?
Right.
And then we've got the land that we own. Yeah, I just, thank you, Ms. Kelly. I really appreciate this. It's very helpful. Just as a person new to all this, myself, just wondering, I mean, has the city kept these logs over the years? I mean, was this a large effort on your part to have to go and document it, or is this something that was already sort of fairly readily available and we just haven't been thinking about like newer policies, or is it just kind of been sort of sitting in the background in terms of our knowing all the properties we own and sort of actively managing them, which I think is what Councilor McGill is really getting at and has been trying to get at.
So I guess the answer to your question is this has kind of been sitting there. There hasn't been one person that's been primarily responsible for addressing this. And as Mr. Sanders said at the last meeting, we've realized this is one of the challenges with staff. And so we need to identify like one person looking at that. So we did have some of this information, so it took a little bit to update all this. There's been some changes since 5 years ago when we started looking at a lot of this, properties that maybe we've gotten rid of or properties that we've acquired since then. So there was a little bit of updating, but a lot of this, we are aware of, some of the sites. And there's a lot of properties that are adjacent to right-of-ways. And, is that something the city council wants to look at? Do we want to approach adjacent property owners and see if there's an interest in putting those on the tax rolls? So I think as we work together with the city attorney's office and the city manager's office and all the various departments, those are the kinds of things we'll be looking at and putting recommendations together of how to move forward with a consistent policy.
Great, thank you very much. And will that be integrated and connected with the lease piece, or are these two separate initiatives?
They're all kind of working together, and also in a month or 2 months or so, we're also going to be coming back to you with another kind of summary of this process with all those other types of agreements that are out there that the city's a party to that was not a lease. So we're doing additional research, look at all those other types of agreements, and we'll be back with you with the same type of recommendation. We need to have point people, and we need to have, kind of consistent policies on what these agreements look like and what they say, and just put together a history that typically has not been located in one central location.
And will the central location be OCS?
So far as we know, yes.
Okay, thank you.
So, my only question is, you said that, it's a lot of things you said that y'all are working on, and you just said something, we're getting another report in maybe a couple of months, but that's not what y'all are working on as far as following up to those things like the Lake Albemarle, those other things. That's more so in the future. I just kind of want to know, I just want to make sure that this doesn't slip through our, fingers again. I just kind of want to make sure that, Mr. Rogers, is something that's kind of on the radar, that we, even if it's November or December, that we have a date that we know that we're getting this back. So, we can have a regular time to update leases or agreements or whatever. So.
With the two pieces, the lease report several weeks back, and this city-owned property report, we have a tremendous amount of information about where we stand. And thanks to Ms. Kelly and her staff and those working with her and Mr. Saunders, we have now the information we need to start addressing the concept even of consistent policies and a consistent point person to work all of this out. So we will be coming back to you with a way forward in this area so that we can straighten it out and keep it straight, going forward. And there'll be a lot of decisions to be made too in terms of, what do you do with all this property? And how does it play into our long-term development plan as well.
Yeah, I appreciate Councilor McGill really making this an issue for us to focus on.
Just, bring it all together, set up a policy.
And I have a comment and a question. First, echo what others have said. It's really, I think this is quietly one of the most important things happening in the city, because from my vantage point, we're landlocked 10.5 square miles. Our single most valuable asset is the land we own. And I think land acquisition in particular is the single most important action the city can take, both for economic development and affordable housing. The question is, I know several years ago when it comes to land acquisition piece, there was discussion of the city creating a land bank, because that would, one, create an easier avenue for the city to acquire new land, and two, would also eliminate property taxes for a property, thus making the development of affordable housing easier. And I would also note that a land bank is part of our adopted affordable housing strategy as well. Has there been any discussion about restarting that conversation or actually implementing a land bank as part of this bigger strategy for how the city could engage in land acquisition?
I think the answer to that is the discussion may have been revived a little bit with the affordable housing plan come forward, but I think I would have to defer to the city manager's office about where we're at in those discussions and if that's going to be brought up again.
Mr. Sanders, you have a comment on that?
Yes, sir. So we haven't pursued the idea of a land bank within the city as much as we have made outreach to the existing land trust to see about them being a partner with us. But we would have to figure that out with the city attorney's office and how to develop the instrument that we would need to be able to establish a land bank and then fund it. I think that's one of the other big issues, that we can create the entity, but we have to have dollars available to then use it for deployment and the acquisition of properties.
But yeah, I would just underline, I think the most important thing to me is if that exists as a tool for acquiring land in the community. But I do think that's vital. And if we can acquire land, even if we can't immediately develop it, we're opening up the opportunity for transformative either affordable housing projects or economic development projects for that matter. So I just don't think we can overemphasize the importance about that enough, but thank you.
And I have a question, Mr. Sanders. So is this land trust that you mentioned, is this the same thing as the Piedmont Land Trust? Okay,
Yes.
all right. And is there scope for us to sort of work together on that in terms of, rather than us setting up our own land bank, perhaps we work with them in their efforts?
Well, I mean, it's a funding mechanism, but there's also the ability to establish yet another entity within that the city would then control.
I see.
How it operates. One of the key aspects of a land bank would be that we'd have to determine who's in control of it. So we would have to determine a structure, a governance structure for it, so that when the decisions come on which properties are available, who votes to say, yes, we take that action to buy that for that price.
Okay, thank you.
And then what do we do with the property once we have control over it? So those are things that all need to be worked out. I guess that's part of why, just to kind of go back to some of the questions, some of the comments that initially came from Mayor Snook and Councilor McGill, this all is a centralizing effort at this moment so that we can get our arms around what we have. But really, it's this conversation that is going to feed us on what next steps we want to take. So we're looking for council to help us with prioritizing what follow-up actions that Brenda is anxiously awaiting more details on what she's going to get to do next.
And all of this information feeds into a more strategic discussion when we start to talk about the strategic plan. I mean, we have all of this background information, and we can pose to you a number of very difficult questions that you will have to grapple with as you consider the future of the city and how these properties play into that.
Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, it's one thing that I've learned since I've been on council is that as far as affordable housing, that land is the most expensive or part of housing. And if we could, any way that we could get properties, work with the existing organizations that's doing it. I know that we have one out there in particular that's doing some great work. I just think it should be a bigger part of our affordable housing strategy. And I know this is not the purpose of this right now, but I just wanted to share that.
It's part of the whole picture of it, though. I mean, it's where are we going from here? How are we utilizing the spaces we own and create? Are we utilizing those spaces in ways that are growing with our vision of the city? And land use is a big part of that, so.
Are
Thank
there other
you so much.
questions for Ms. Kelly or Mr. Sanders or anybody?
No, we're good.
Great.
Thanks for the work.
Thank you. It's a lot of, this also seems to fit into the category of archaeology or paleontology or digging up the old history. I appreciate the effort. So, thank you. We have now another presentation, Rivanna Water and Sewer Authority Central Water Line Project Update from Bill Moyer, the Executive Director. And Mr. Moyer, we see you right there on the screen, so you must be ready to roll.
Thank you, Mayor Snook and members of the council. It's always a pleasure to speak with you. Yes, I've had the privilege of being executive director at Rivanna for about 6 years, and appreciate the opportunity to tell you today more about an essential regional drinking water supply project. So I know you talk about land being important, and we would say that water supply is an important aspect too. So let me try to share my screen. Go. It worked, I think. So I have with me today Jennifer Whitaker, our Director of Engineering and Maintenance, as well Michelle Simpson, who's done all the heavy lifting on this project to date and for the last several years. So we call it the Central Waterline Project because it was recommended to be located in the central portion of the city to provide the greatest water benefit to our regional water supply system. Before I jump into the alignment and the streets and such, I wanted to give you a little historical context on why this is a critical project. In 2002, and many of you may recall, there was the historic drought of record in the state of Virginia, including Charlottesville. And there was talk about sending the students home because the South Rivanna Reservoir was about dry and the urban area was running out of water. And so the council with the Board of Supervisors and Rivanna and the Albemarle County Service Authority, and we came up with what was called the Community Water Supply Plan. And basically that included building a new dam at the Ragged Mountain Reservoir and increasing the capacity of that facility from about 500 million gallons to 1.4 billion gallons as it is today. And also to upgrade our two major water treatment plants, the Observatory Water Treatment Plant located on Observatory Mountain on university property, as well the South Rivanna Water Treatment Plant located at the Hilton Heights area off of Woodburn Road. And that gets its water from the South Rivanna Reservoir. And further, we would build this Purple Line water transfer pipe, a large 36-inch pipe that we could pump water from the South Rivanna Reservoir to the Ragged Mountain Reservoir because it will not fill itself. And further, we can pump backwards from the Ragged Mountain Reservoir to the South Rivanna Treatment Plant. So the Community Water Supply Plan improved the quantity of water we had in our supply. And when we finish in the next year or so, the renovations at our two large water treatment plants, it will have improved our ability to produce more water. So that covers projects 1 and 2 here on this list. Next, we need to build a new line between the Ragged Mountain Reservoir and the Observatory Treatment Plant. The existing line has reached the end of its service life, and we think it's recommended to put in a new pipe. So that will get us the production of additional water along with the treatment plant improvements. And then thirdly, and somewhat lastly, we realized later it was not a part of the original community water supply plan, that we need to have a large pipe coming away from the observatory treatment plant so that we can distribute that water through all parts of the city and the county, the urban water area, as we call it. So this total plan is estimated to cost about $195 million over the next 10 years. And the city's share of that through our various agreements is about $69 million. The Albemarle County Service Authority would be paying the balance. Okay. So this central water line project, as we call it, is going to be about 5 miles of large water transmission piping. You can see in this center picture here, this gentleman on his knee, but you can tell how large. That's about a 42-inch pipe. So not quite that large, but in the similar neighborhood, it's going to be a large water transmission pipe. It would be installed under the streets of the city in a segmented process. And what we mean there is we don't come in and allow the contractor to excavate 5 miles. We give him several hundred feet at a time, and he excavates and puts in the new pipe, and then he has to cover it up and put it back into service to traffic. We expect the schedule to be from 2024 through 2028. And the agreement we have between the Service Authority and the city is the city would share 48% of the debt service costs that we pay for this project. Some of the history is that in 1987, the city and the Albemarle Service Authority created what was called the Southern Loop Agreement. And that agreement, I'll slide forward here, was on the same vein as what we're talking about, that water pipes, these large blue lines are water transmission pipes. This is the observatory treatment plant area, and this is the observatory treatment storage tank. And the Southern Loop Agreement was going to build what was called the western branch of the Southern Loop, which was completed in 1989. And that was going to connect the observatory treatment plant with the Avon Street water storage tank. And then in the future, we were going to build the eastern branch of the Southern Loop, which was going to go from the Avon tank to the Green Star here, which is at Free Bridge area of East High and Long Street. And that loop was going to be called the Southern Loop. And the purpose was to have a connected system so that we could distribute water of large quantities of water throughout the urban area. So the eastern branch was never constructed, but in around 2019, actually 2017, we started on a project designed to build what we called the Avon to Pantops pipeline. It was going to be the eastern branch. Immediately our team, which included your public utilities director and also your city traffic engineer, and we realized that out at the perimeter of the eastern area was not a good place for that pipe. It would not serve the demand area of the city or the adjacent county in a very effective way. And so we began in 2019 what we call the Urban Finished Water Master Plan, and that was completed late last year, early this year. And it recommended that the best place for this pipe was through the central corridor of the city, hence the name, the Central Water Line. In 2020, the city and the Service Authority in Ravenna came to an agreement that the renovations to build, again, this brown line, the water transfer line from the Ragged Mountain Reservoir to Observatory, this pump station that was going to be here as well, the renovations to this Observatory treatment plant and expanding the treatment capacity, and further the construction of the Central Water Line. And we came to an agreement that it was important on the allocation of the cost that basically the city's going to pay 48% of those costs. And there was a commitment in the agreement that the Central Water Line would be built near the central corridor of the city because if we expand the water treatment plant and we replace the raw water line to get it to the treatment plant, it has no benefit if we can't really get that water out into the system. So this was going to, again, be a larger pipe to help us get water into the urban drinking water system. Further, then we did a central water line routing study to be more specific about where the pipe should go, and we finished our water master plan. So again, these large blue lines are major water transmission mains coming in from the South Ravenna Water Treatment Plant. This one terminates around West Main Street and Rosie Brown. This one is up, it terminates up at Hydraulic Road. Now, when I say terminate, the large pipe stops and a smaller distribution pipe takes over, the ones that the city would own. And our goal of all this was to get connected the observatory treatment plant to the Pantops tank at Free Bridge is where the water line would connect. Because our purpose is that the way we operate the system, to some degree, we make water a lot at night, and we fill all the tanks that are in our system at Observatory, at Avon, and over at Pantops. And we fill those tanks at night, and then during the day, they provide the flow and the pressure to the customers within the area, and we refill the tanks at night. So part of our challenge was we had poor connectivity between the Observatory treatment plant, we still have it, and the Pantops tank. We can get water from Observatory to Avon, and we can get it from South Ravenna treatment plant to Pantops, but it's difficult to get water through all the small pipes across the city from west to east to the Pantops tank. And that was the problem and the issue we're trying to solve with this piping project. Another point to understand is when the South Ravenna Reservoir is overflowing. So when you drive up 29 North, you pass Walmart and cross the Ravenna Bridge there, you look to the left, you can see the South Ravenna Reservoir Dam. If water is overflowing there, it's going through the Ravenna River on its way to the James River. And we maximize the use of the water from the South Ravenna Reservoir whenever and as long as the South Ravenna Reservoir is overflowing, which is most of the time. However, when we have hot, dry summers, particularly, the flow across the dam might stop, and that's when we transfer our major production from the South Ravenna Water Treatment Plant to the Observatory Treatment Plant and try to use our largest reservoir supply, water from the Ragged Mountain Reservoir, to provide water to the urban system. So now instead of, like in the winter, we're pumping water from the South Ravenna plant southward into the city. In a hot, dry summer, we could be producing it at Observatory and trying to get it through the city and pumping it northward to the county in all directions, east, west, south, and trying to keep the Pantops tank along with the Avon tank and the Observatory tanks full of water. So we operate our system differently depending on the demands and where we have the greatest water. When water is overflowing the South Ravenna Reservoir, it's gone from our system and it provides us no value. And that's why we try to maximize use of that as long as the South Ravenna Reservoir is overflowing. But when we have really dry weather, we have to switch to use the Ragged Mountain Reservoir and the Observatory Treatment Plant. And again, our challenge at the moment is to be able to get that water out of the Observatory Treatment Plant in large pipes and into our system. And this provides consistent supply and pressure to all the customers in the city and the county. It supports our firefighting requirements. It improves the flexibility of our system to be able to adjust if we would have a water break somewhere. We can backfeed our piping with the water, and it helps us utilize the investment that's been made in the Observatory Water Treatment Plant. So we talked with council, I did with council and our board of directors about our plan in January. And received positive feedback. And so since then, we've been working on our public outreach program to tell the neighborhoods about what we plan to do with this project. And our primary alignment is what we call the Southern Cherry Avenue alignment. And we presented information to 6 neighborhoods along that route. We mailed a flyer, the flyer you see here to my right, on the Central Waterline project. We mailed that out to 480 property owners and businesses along the route. We have a web page with this information. We got several good comments from our neighborhood meetings. We appreciate their participation. And so since then, we've gone back and reevaluated 5 primary routes as well as 5 alternate routes of where this water line could be located. So with our team of the city utility director, Lauren Hildebrand, and Brendan Duncan, your traffic engineer, along with the service authority staff, our staff, and our engineering consultants, we looked in the field, we visited the sites and surveyed and analyzed the different routes. We've looked at the VDOT traffic estimates that they provide. We've looked at GIS data, aerial photography, and we've done an extensive hydraulic modeling to let the computer tell us how the water flows best in these various piping alternatives. We looked at the water distribution benefits, as I mentioned, from the water modeling. At the traffic counts, we impact to neighborhoods, businesses, the UVA academic side, the UVA medical area district and hospital area. We looked at the street widths to see where we could work reasonably within streets. And overall construction cost was an important factor. We looked at pipe lengths. We looked at opportunities to coordinate with city projects or other projects and tree clearing, and even underground to a degree so far about, it's easy to say put a pipe in the street, but if there are already a bunch of communication cables and other pipes in the way, we can't do that as easily. So we've looked at a number of different factors when we come up with the recommended alternatives. And so we've evaluated 5 primary routes. And you can see on this slide the 5 routes, starting from the north to south. And so I'll run through each one of them and give you a few details. The first route that we looked at was a recommendation we got from a resident at a neighborhood meetings of, well, why didn't we put the pipe around the Route 250 bypass? And that would be half the length as some of the other alternatives. And that would be true, and that could be a viable alternative. But what we determined in our review is that our finished water master plan talked about an Emmett Street project that is planned. And the comment from the resident was that project from JPA Stadium Road all the way to Hydraulic was already planned and funded, and all we needed to do was to build the eastern half of it, save money. But the real plan is that there are only 2 projects that the city has funded and we have definite plans for along this Emmett Street route. And those are shown with these blue lines. These are 2 projects that are pretty definite that will be built. And would not have to be advanced because they are under plans and designed to be done now or in the future. So what we really had to look at, we realized, is that along this route, we had to plan for more than just half of the route. We also had to fill in the gaps between the blue lines all the way back to the observatory treatment plant. Because again, our goal is to get water from the Green Star treatment plant over to Free Bridge. And ultimately, we realized, and in talking to Brennan, your traffic engineer, that work on the bypass was going to be quite a challenge, that likely would have to be completed at night due to the impacts on traffic. That does have one of the higher traffic counts in our area. And potentially we would have to close 2 lanes of the bypass each day during the night. and rebuild them early in the morning, that our work time would be 8 p.m. to 5 a.m., and then we'd have to be out of the street. And so that was about a $45 million alternative, was to get from Free Bridge up to hydraulic just for that section. We also looked at if we could get out of the street along McIntyre Park. It would save about $7.5 million, but it would require clearing of a number of trees in that area, which we don't think the city's going to be too interested in. We've also looked at doing a bore and actually boring under trees, which would probably reduce this savings. So collectively, in order to have a comprehensive connected water system, we can't just build from Free Bridge to hydraulic and stop, because the Emmett Street projects are not planned to be finished before at least 2035, and our project is planned to be finished in 2028. And that's why, again, these black dotted sections here, we feel like have to be funded by the Central Water Line project and completed in conjunction with that work to have a comprehensive system. And the total cost of that project is about $60 million.
Mr. Moyer, if I could ask a quick question, could you explain the piece here about upsizing pipe diameter and how that impacts cost?
Right. Well, again, the Emmett Street project is a planned project in our finished water master plan, but its purpose is to provide redundancy to some of the pipes we already have. These large blue pipes we already have. This section of the Emmett Street was to help provide redundancy. So not only would we have 1 and 2 major pipes, we'd have 3 major pipes coming into the city, as well, that we could get water from Green Star to Green Star if we went all the way to Rio Road, and then we had to come back around Rio Road to get to Free Bridge area. So while it's a long route, it is redundant to other Central Water Line routes and helps us get water that way. Let's see, Mr.
I guess my
Kingston, what was
point-
your question again?
Yeah, so to go this alternate route, if we were hypothetically to do it, the proposed pipe diameter would have to go up
Oh,
due
right.
to more flow going across that route, and also more distance in terms of friction losses. So
That's right.
I think
So what I was-
understanding, it's not just enough to say, well, there's already a pipe up there. The pipe that's being planned is 6 inches smaller than what y'all need, and 6-inch, it's a significant more piping area that would be required, so.
Correct. We did not plan on this Emmett Street pipe, which is intended to be built when it's convenient, when we can have what we call a betterment project. That is when UVA is doing a project along Emmett Street, maybe at Emmett and Ivy, we're doing a betterment project with them right now. Or VDOT, when they were going to make improvements to the hydraulic interchange, that whenever we can partner with the city or UVA or VDOT, and they were already going to rip the road open to do some utility work, we would join with them, and that would be the time we would put in our new pipe to create this redundancy with the other pipes in bringing water in and out of the city. So it was not a definitely planned project, and we envisioned by 2035. But again, as you mentioned, Mr. Pinkston, the purpose was to transmit water from South Ravenna plant into the city and connect it with the observatory treatment plant. And the pipe size required to do that is not the same as the pipe size trying to get water over to Free Bridge along a longer route. And we would have to upsize the pipe and incur additional expense. And that is included in the $60 million for us to do that.
And would that be, is that separate from the Emmett water line that's in the master plan for 2035?
No, sir. That's pretty much the same. There is an extension of the Emmett Street that goes to the further north that would need to be built. But the 60 million is intended, it will represent all of what you see of constructing from Free Bridge to hydraulic, and then down JPA or Stadium. There's an opportunity, maybe we could cut across Stadium Road right here to get close to the observatory treatment plant. That full length is included in the 60 million, although the two blue sections are funded separately and they are not included in the 60 million. That is separate funding that's been allocated, as we understand it, by the city for your two projects.
So just to understand, if I'm understanding correctly, so in the master plan for 2035, there's an Emmett Seminole water line for 18 million. Does this 60 million include that 18 million?
It includes part of it. I think it's 5 or 6 million planned for these two blue sections. The 60 million would, actually, we've estimated 15 million of the 60 is for the black dotted areas, the 3 segments along Emmett Street.
And is that going to be built anyway, regardless of, already
will-
within the master plan?
We expect it to be built, although it may not be built before 2035.
What creates the uncertainty around that compared to the projects you don't have that level of uncertainty about?
Well, we don't have our sections programmed in our capital improvement plan yet. We haven't included in our rates and charges to the city or the service authority yet. So as we got closer to the time frame for when we would start including it in our budget, then we have to see the impact it has to the budgets. And again, it's a redundancy project. It's not quite as essential project as the Central Water Line. And so other priorities could change the schedule. Another example is if the university or the city or VDOT would delay a project where we were going to do a betterment, a partnership, then that would delay the project also.
So in other words, it's in the adopted master plan for completion by 2035, but not your CIP budget.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
So it's planned, but it's not definite. So we did, I mentioned we looked at the alternative of cutting through the park that might save some money. If you're ready to go on to the second alternative, that's what we call the Northern Preston alternative. Again, we go from Stadium up JPA or up Stadium Road, up Emmett Street. It would turn to the east through the Lambeth, the University Lambeth area, where we connect into a city pumping station. Then it would go up Rugby Road, down Grady, down Preston. It would then go up the hill to West High Street and find its way to East High Street. Now, that is an area where the city has a project planned along East High Street, and some of our strategy is to try to connect and do our pipe at the same time the city does your pipe, and that's why you see the blue dotted line here. This is where we are partnering with the city to do a water line project along with your project.
There's also
So-
a project in an earlier section of that too.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
There's another project at an earlier section,
Oh, right here?
Rugby to Preston. That section of Barracks, Emmett, right there, up Barracks, up Preston.
The city has this project from Ivy Road to Arlington Boulevard. That's planned. And we would be partnering with the city there also.
The bike streetscape, the bikes, up the Barracks Road Hill up there by Rugby.
Barracks Road. This turns to Rugby
Right.
before you get to Barracks Road at Lambeth Housing. It goes right beside the railroad tracks at Lambeth over to Rugby Road.
And then across Grady.
Grady and, or down Grady to Preston. And then it would go up the hill at the county office building area onto West High Street and make its way to East High Street and connect to our object target area at East High and Long Street.
Okay, never mind. I see.
We did look at an alternate route of coming down Preston and going over McIntyre Road and then coming down that section of the bypass. But we estimate that would be about $3 million more expensive and would reintroduce us into night work along the bypass. So this route was a pretty good route, but we were not real interested in going through the Rugby housing area and the Grady Preston housing area, as well the business district on West High Street.
What made a greater concern about disrupting those neighborhoods versus the neighborhoods that would be disrupted in the current plan for the Central Water Line? Is that based on a traffic analysis or study or?
Yes, and road widths, street widths, in which we could work in. I mean, the reality is we're going to have a certain level of disruption on every route. And it's a good question. I don't know if there's any more disruption along this area of Rugby, Grady, and Preston. But it is seemed to be more dense than the Cherry Avenue route, at least along the main Cherry Avenue area and JPA Cleveland. So it's a little bit subjective there. But this was not our recommended route, but it is a viable route.
Thank
The
you.
third route we looked at was we called the middle route, West Main Street. And I think this was really born from initially with an objective of coordinating with the city on your West Main project. And of course, that's not happening anymore, but the route was to go up JPA, then it would turn further on JPA through the academic area of the university and the medical district and by the hospital, and go down Main Street, go down at Vinegar Hill down Ridge to Preston, and then back up that hill there to West High Street to make its way to East High Street. The concerns with this route were the congestion of traffic and pedestrians and business impacts through the UVA academic area, the hospital medical district, as well the business area on West Main Street, West High Street. But this one also had a cost estimate of $39 million. But the fourth route we considered and reconsidered was going down Jefferson Park Avenue Extended, I would call it. We go down Cleveland, then we follow Cherry across Ridge Street on Elliott Avenue. It turns to the north on 6th Street, and then before it crosses the railroad track, it goes across Avon and would come under the railroad track around 10th Street, and then go to the east on Jefferson and over to East High Street on 11th Street. And that is our recommended route. Now, when we had our neighborhood meetings, they said, well, what about going down Harris all the way to 5th Street and come up 5th Street? So we took a careful look at that. We found that there were two disadvantages. One, it was going to be about $8 million more expensive because it's a longer route, much longer route. And further, as you know, 5th Street is a major street for emergency services that come in 5th and then turn on Cherry to get to the hospital area. So working in 5th Street with its high traffic count seemed to be an impediment to that route. And that was the reason we were not recommending it. That estimate for the Harris Fifth Street alternative, we estimate about $49 million. We also heard from our neighborhood meetings, well, actually, we had thought about going down Shamrock Avenue. And we've talked to Brennan Duncan pretty extensively about that because we think it would save about $3 million. It's a shorter route. But Shamrock is such a narrow street, no shoulder on one side with on-street parking, very congested. You have the railroad track and the vertical curve leading up to that, below the railroad track. We thought this was, even though it would save some money, it would be a major impediment on the Shamrock Road neighborhood. And that's why we're not recommending that route, but it is possible. And further, we heard from residents about, instead of
So,
coming across.
I'm sorry, Bill, quickly, just with that one, the Shamrock alternative, it's significantly shorter. I'm just wondering that, you know, if it's shorter, it'll take less time. If you do it in the summertime, I don't know if that impact, you know, it'll be harder and more difficult, but it'll be quicker and cheaper. I'm just kind of thinking out loud.
Potentially, the challenge, Mr. Wade, is with that restricted curb-to-curb width of getting traffic in and out of there. It could slow down work. While
Oh, okay.
while it's shorter, we think it will save some money and probably time, but it's going to be a real headache for the people who live over there. Either us trying to get them through, or asking them to detour to come back to their house. So again, this is a viable route, but it was our judgment, and again, Brendan seemed to concur. He did concur that this was not a recommended alternative.
Thank you.
To the JPA Extended and Cleveland and Cherry. On the other end of this route, a neighborhood asked, well, why don't we, instead of going down 10th and 11th, why don't we go down, East Water or East Market to Meade? And what the bullets here tell you that the East Market option was $1 million more expensive, and the East Water was $2.6 million more expensive. Plus, they negate our cooperative effort right here with the city project. We would miss at least half of the city project, and that contributes to the cost addition. So it's a valid suggestion to use these other routes, and we could do it, but there seem to be disadvantages with the longer route, more expense, and we're not coordinating with an ongoing city project there. So in summary, we put together this chart. We looked at, again, the Route 250 bypass chart,
Bill,
yes, sir?
Mr. Moy, could you increase the zoom on that slightly?
Oh, I'm sorry, okay. That help?
Yes.
All right. So we've got the overall pipe length. The CWL is what we would call the central waterline section. The EWL is the Emmett Street waterline section, or the black dotted, black and orange sections that we detailed. Collectively, it's almost 31,000 lineal feet. It has a maximum traffic count of 39 vehicles per day, but significant is that 85% of the route has more than 10,000 vehicles per day on it. Because these routes, there are different traffic counts in different sections. And so while I was anxious just to pick one number, our team said, no, we needed to look at the full route and deal with the maximums and the percentage greater than 10,000. So that's what we've done here. So as you might expect, the Route 250 bypass had the highest maximum traffic and a very high average of 85%, more than 10,000 cars along the full length. The route with the least maximum traffic was the southern Cherry Avenue route, and it also had the least traffic of only 32% of the length was there more than 10,000 vehicles per day. We looked at the construction time. We felt like with the night work and the length and the challenges of Route 250 bypass, in theory, it would take almost 8 years to do it. In practice, we're only planning to allocate 4 years to the contractor. So he would have to double up on his crews, and the city and the vehicles would have to withstand more construction areas along the route in order for us to finish within the 4 years. The estimated cost for the central water line section, and that section only on the 250 bypass, was $45 million. Again, Preston was pretty competitive at $28 million. The Main Street was $39 million, Cherry 41, and the Harris Street at $49 million. But again, to get the full cost of adding in the Emmett Street section of $15 million, that pushed the Route 250 bypass to $60 million. The Preston Avenue route that also goes down Emmett to $39 million. The Main Street is $39. The Cherry Avenue at $41 million, and the Harris Street at $49 million. So while we're recommending the Cherry Avenue route, it is not the estimated least expensive route. Again, but we felt like the Main Street conflicts to the business district and the medical district, as well as some of the impacts in the district, business district from the northern route, that the $2 million was not a significant reason to choose those routes. And further, when we looked at really our primary criteria is water system benefits, that the Cherry Avenue route and the Main Street route, as well as the 5th Street route, had the highest water benefits to our system now and in the future. And also the Cherry provided the greatest ease of future operations and maintenance, that if we have a water break in the future, to get out in Cherry Avenue and work is to fix it is a lot easier and less expensive than trying to work in the bypass or in Main Street or in the business district areas of the Preston Avenue alternative or 5th Street. So this is kind of the ranking criteria that we used. We have reams and reams of data back behind these numbers, but we tried to roll them up to something that hopefully is reasonably understandable to everyone. And let's see, in summary,
Mr.
I
Moyer,
would say that
Could-
all the alignments have challenges. Not all of them work equally as well for us in providing hydraulic connectivity and allowing us to get water across the city and into the county. We think the Southern Cherry Avenue, when all things are considered, provides the greatest benefit and opportunity for us. We recognize that there will be impacts along the way. We know there's Buford School over there that we would likely try to work with in that area maybe during the summer. That would be our plan, when we can least impact the businesses or residents along the way. It would be all day work. And it does have the lowest impacts to traffic. It's got a wide curb to curb street section, and we could keep traffic going around our construction area during the construction period. It's got a reasonably low project cost, and it gives us an ease of operations and maintenance. And when we do get the Emmett Street project completed in the future, it will provide the greatest hydraulic piping water flow benefits when paired with the Emmett Street improvements compared to any of the other alternatives. So that is what we're recommending, is that we proceed with the Southern or Cherry Avenue alignment number 4. I don't know if I allowed you to ask your questions, but I would be glad to try to answer them.
Yeah, I thought that you said that the Cherry Avenue is that it is high on emergency vehicles and things. I know you said
Well,
they
Fifth
take
Street-
Fifth
Fifth
Street
Street
and then
would
to
be-
Cherry.
5th Street would be the most high. Cherry does have the section from Fifth Street, where am I looking? Fifth Street over to
Roosevelt?
right there at Roosevelt Road.
Yeah.
So, let me
Okay.
see. Yeah, this is what I was looking for. Yeah, so Fifth Street coming into at Ridge and Cherry, and this section right here would be a high traffic as emergency traffic particularly is trying to make its way to the University Hospital.
Mr. Moore, can you
But
go back up?
otherwise, Cherry is the lowest. So that's reflected, Cherry, that only 32% of the length of the route has more than 10,000 vehicles per day, which was the lowest percentage of any of the routes. I think, Juan, that over here on Cherry Avenue to the west of Rosie Brown Boulevard, the traffic there count is like 5,000 vehicles per day.
Thank you.
Mr.
much
Moyer,
less
could you go
Street.
back up to the northern route, Preston route?
Yes, sir.
So the dotted black lines that you have there, that would be costs borne by RWSA at some point.
That's correct. And shared, of course, that with the city and the service authority, like all of our costs.
Sure. But that's the extra piece added into your figures on the final.
Yes, sir. This, we would have to build this section of the Emmett Street waterline project. And we have included those costs in the $39 million estimate.
And then in terms of if you could go back to the summary, please.
Yes, sir.
So I'm assuming that one of the things that's really important to me is the duration of this. We can't, that does connect to cost, but it also
Yes.
connects very closely to aggravation and frustration for people. And so the ones that are 4 years, which are the northern and the southern Cherry, is that partly reflecting the fact that those roads are wider and you've got more room to work in them?
Yes, sir. We would say more constructible. They're wider. We have more room to work and to detour traffic around us. Again, the bypass it would be require night work, which typically is slower, and we have to deal with all the traffic out there. It's a possibility we would close 2 lanes and have to build a temporary lane over to the second 2 lanes and create a one-way traffic on each of those lanes in order to work during the night and then restore the two-way traffic by 5 a.m. the next morning. So
Yeah,
As
and my
I
guess
said-
is that you're not going to be able to cut the 8 months or the 8 years in half by that kind of work. But by those kinds of efforts, you might cut it maybe by a third or 40% or something. But
right, again, unless we require multiple crews from the contractor that he's got to maybe start on the east side and the west side at the same time in order to expedite and stay within a lesser time frame. But then that doubles the number of work sites and doubles the congestion and traffic congestion. So the city would have to bear through twice as many sites in theory.
right, thank you.
Turn to the alignment number 2, I think, Northern Preston. I guess I'm still not understanding 2 points. One, you mentioned that like the neighborhood disruption there would be too great to make that, in your opinion, a route you'd recommend. I'll just ask again, is that evaluation, the route that is recommended obviously includes in part going through residential neighborhoods, including public housing and other low-income communities. Is that evaluation that the disruption in that alignment number 2, the Northern Preston route for neighborhoods, is too great compared to what is recommended in the disruption there. Is that based on specific traffic data, specific data about density, or was that a subjective evaluation that was made?
I think we have data, Mr. Payne, but we did have some subjective view of it. But like in the public housing area on 6th Street, that's a very wide curb-to-curb section, and the houses are pretty far away from the street, whereas on Grady and Rugby and Preston, those houses were much closer to the curb, and that's where the subjective part came in, that we had little room to maneuver within the curb-to-curb area, and the impact was going to be right on, our noise and disruption was going to be right on top of the houses, compared to the Cherry route, where yes, maybe in some places it would be, but not as much as the Rugby, Grady, Preston area.
And then another question in your chart outlining the pros and cons of each. In the Northern Preston route, the water system benefits are listed as lower, whereas the route you recommended, that's listed as higher. Could you quantify what that means specifically, and is that based on specific data?
Yes, we ran dozens and dozens of water modeling scenarios about how water could flow through the system under different conditions. And when we collectively looked at all of those water modeling runs, we somewhat subjectively had a decision about which routes had the lowest impact or the best impact on the water benefits that we were looking for. Jennifer, do you have any data that you could offer Mr. Payne or Michelle?
Sure. So as Bill indicated, we looked at probably well over 20 plus runs, and we looked at the water modeling. We looked at how the tanks operated, whether they worked well together, whether there was a significant separation. We looked at fire flow. We looked at each water treatment plant running under different demand scenarios. We looked at if we had a break or we had a major maintenance event, if we were operating under drought. And then for each of those scenarios, we looked at what the system, how the system was operating. And in some cases, one was slightly better than the other. And we looked down that list of the 20 or 30 runs and assessed which set of conditions posed the greatest benefit to us. And when we did that, you can see the outcome here is that the connectivity that we get from the southern loop, the central water line that ties in all of these mains and provides this main corridor that goes east-west through the city in a relatively straight line, really did provide the greatest hydraulic benefits overall to the system under the most number of conditions.
Thank you, and I'll just final comment, with the caveat that obviously I'm not an engineer and have not served RWSA, so certainly haven't followed all the details the entire time. But I will say, just from my vantage point with that caveat, I do continue to have some concern in terms of, is the route that's being recommended, is that really the best route in terms of objective criteria, and how much that decision has been influenced by subjective criteria. Particularly when I look at the Northern Preston route, granted it's not in the CIP, but it is in the adopted master plan, the efficiencies that could come there with the already planned Emmett Street water line, the fact that that is the cheapest option, and again, the efficiencies with the already planned Emmett Street water line. And again, from an outsider perspective, it raises my eyebrow that a project that, at least on my understanding, while adding some redundancy to the whole system, is primarily benefiting the Pantops area in the northern area of the city and county, is being routed through the southern part of the city, particularly public housing and low-income communities. And I just, again, I haven't been on the RWSA, but based on what I've seen, I don't have full confidence that that's being based entirely on objective criteria and isn't also being influenced unduly by some other subjective criteria. But thank you.
Yeah, and I'd like to follow up on that point. If you could go back to the southern loop, please, the one that you're proposing. Okay, just stop there for a second. Right, so the other thing that I think Councilor Payne is really being lost in this whole conversation is there's a desire or there's a concern that more of this water, well, first of all, this is working as a network, right? Like the capillaries in your body. And so even if you do the Preston option or any other option, the goal is to increase the connections all throughout the whole system. And many of these are small lines that you can't see. But the point raised by a number of people that all of this water is going to go to the north or whatever, which again I think is fallacious for a number of reasons. But regardless, with this route that's being proposed here, one of the great values of it, because it is running through the southern part of the city, particularly if you look at Avon Street there, what this will let RWSA do is connect a much larger line down there to feed the lower side of the city. So one of the extra benefits of doing it this way is that you get larger transmission lines on the southern side of the city. So, you know, that's not something that's been brought up tonight, but it's an important reason that I think this is the most reasonable route, because beyond all the things on the chart, which, you know, all such rankings are subjective to some degree, but I'm convinced that they've been as objective as you can, you know, as engineers, and engineers have blind spots. But the other piece about this is, to the concern that's been raised over and over, that this is somehow just all going to help the people in the county, which I don't know why it's a problem that we'd want to help people in the county, but particularly when they're paying 52% of it. Regardless, what this does is it finishes that lower southeast corner of the city that people have complained was not done earlier with the Southern Loop Agreement, particularly in that it connects to these larger lines that are not shown here that feed the southern part of the city. So that's all I'll say as an engineer and as someone on RWSA.
Well said. Thank you.
Other questions or comments for Mr. Moyer? I wanted to note, this is, I suppose I'm not an engineer either, and I am a lawyer, and one of the things that I look for is what the law tells us council's role is. And council does not, we were getting a lot of emails today saying, vote no on the central water line. We don't actually get a vote. This is, RWSA can operate on its own and has the authority to choose its own route. And of course, we have members of our administration, the city manager, Mr. Pinkston from the council, who serve on the RWSA board who have a vote, but council as a whole does not have a vote. And so I want folks to understand the limited role that we have, and our role is at this point to try to make sure that the RWSA board is considering all of the factors, including some of the factors that Mr. Payne mentioned, and that they make then their best choice given all of those circumstances. Anyway, I'm just, the picky legal point is we don't get a vote. So, let's see, that is about the end. Mr. Moyer, I think we're done with you. Thank you so much for your presentation, and appreciate you being here. And I know there will be a lot more questions going forward, and I know that what happened tonight isn't going to answer everybody's questions, but I thought it was very helpful.
Thank you. Thank you.
So the next item for us, that's all on our 4 o'clock agenda. And so it would be time at this point for us to adjourn the 4 o'clock portion, and then we would need to go back into closed session so that we can do the same kinds of things we were doing earlier. Mr. Wade, you want to
Thank
read the
you.
motion?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Mayor, pursuant to Section 2.2-3712 of the Virginia Code, I hereby move that the Charlottesville City Council close this open meeting and convene within a closed meeting as authorized by the Virginia Code, Section 2.2-3711, subsection A, subsection 1, comma, subsection A, subsection A, subsection 7 and 8 for consideration of appointment to council and the City Plan Commission and other boards and commission, legal consideration regarding compliance with requirements of Virginia Code 15.2-2212 and related ordinance and resolution to discuss various pending litigation matters.
Litigation matters.
Litigation, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Okay, is there a second to that motion?
Second?
Again, we can just do this by voice vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the motion passes. Council will now go back into closed session. We will return at 6:30, and for those who are doing things by Zoom, I think it will be in a different Zoom link at 6:30, so good luck finding it. See you back in 55 minutes.